Hello, let's go back in time. BassMaster Magazine. Right now we're about 6 years into my career. This is going to be 1980 September October issue, and it's just again following these past times and the evolution of the sport and the evolution of Rick Clunn. But first part of this one is basically just right now, here we are, like I said, in the latter part of the year. The Classic's coming up. Again, it's still being held in the fall of the year in October. So it's not being reported in this one because they're late, even though the Classic probably is over when this magazine came out. But and this is just current standings for the Classic for this 1980, and I don't remember this, but they actually must have split it in two divisions. And even though I fished both divisions, I led the East Division. You know, in the Classic standings. And then Larry Nixon overall won Angler of the Year this year, so he was Angler of the Year in 1980, and I ended up second in the Angler of the Year standings. So it's, again, just kind of going back in time, and it was moving fast then, still moves fast. And but still a lot of emphasis on these magazines on depth finders, electronics, pH equipment here. You know, now everybody's talking about the electronics age now with forward facing, but we had a lot of that going on back then. Color monitors, pH monitors, measuring the pH of the water. And then again, Basil Bacon, a Missouri friend from Springfield, Missouri now, where it's kind of near my home currently, won this tournament at Guntersville. I remember exactly how he won it. And if you got any children watching this, I'm going to tell you something here you may not want the children to know about. But Basil won it, and he was flipping, flipping thick milfoil on the edge of the river channel there at Lake Guntersville. And, you know, I heard about it the second day. So the second day, obviously, we switched to that technique. And my partner, we were just flipping real heavy weights like you did, and plastic worms over into the boat's kind of sitting in the channel, but the grass comes all the way to the edge of the channel. We were flipping over in the thick grass and the little holes and stuff. I kept hearing my partner buzzing sound coming from him. He had this big 7.5, 8 foot flipping stick over in the weeds, and I kept looking, and he had something taped around the handle of his rod. And he'd flip over into the thick grass, and then he'd turn the handle back there, and it would start buzzing, and he'd just hold it, and the rod would be just shaking. Okay, I'm going to just let you imagine what that was, but you can really normally just find them in adult stores. But I couldn't believe, I said, really? He said, yeah, it works real well. I just flip over in there and I turn it on and just let it sit there on the bottom, and it's just vibrating and shaking. Well, that's a kind of a neat story. You know, he caught the biggest bass of the tournament about an hour later doing that, 8-something. So anyway, you'll see a little bit of everything. Next tournament was at Toledo Bend. Larry Nixon, who was guiding out on Toledo Bend at this time, along with Tommy Martin and John Torian and John Hale and several other guys were actually, fishing Toledo Bend. Larry won it. I don't know, trying to see if I don't think I actually did well in this event. But even though the Classic was held in October, we're starting basically the year, looks like the year over here a little bit, for the following year to qualify for the Classic. And then Albemarle Sound, Tommy Chapman Well, they just fished Albemarle Sound recently in the elite event this year, 2025, and they caught over 100 pounds. I ended up 14th. The memory about this boat was, this tournament was, the first day, this Albemarle Sound's huge, and it's a massive amount of water, and it really was rough when we took off the first day. And I went with my partner because he had a little bit bigger boat than I had. And so we were running in the Sound, and about halfway down, I noticed water started shooting up through the drain plugs in the bottom of the boat. I mean, literally like you had a hose, and it would just, and so he slows down, and we're just idling, and it quits, but there's water now kind of coming up through the bottom of the hull. To make a long story short, he had split his hull. And when he would run, it would open up and suck water into the deal. And when he'd stop, it would close back up, and it would still leak, but it wasn't just pouring in. And we finally got to the water where we were fishing after just pretty well idling and pumping water and bailing water out. And that evening we had to call and get another people to come get us because we weren't about to try to run all the way back through the Sound with a cracked hull. And the next day, this local guy was a co-angler. He said, you can fish out of I borrowed his boat, which was a big glass-drawn bass boat that I had helped design. And I wasn't running that boat for this tournament, though. I was running one of the smaller glass-drawns. And anyway, so that one, that you know, really handled it very well. It was a deep V bottom. My brother Randy Fight ended up 4th in the tournament, and he had drawn John Powell the last day of the tournament. And somehow he convinced John, who was pretty headstrong and pretty well known back then in the BASS tournament circuits, to go with him. And so anyway, John and Randy were running that same area I was fishing, down, way down into another big creek, fishing in some canals where the bass were spawning. And so that evening when I saw him weigh in, John had a bass over 10 pounds fishing. And I said, well, John, how did it go? And he said, well, your brother, he's a pretty darn good fisherman. He put us on some really nice fish. I had this 10-pounder. He said, but would you tell him something for me? And I said, sure, John, 'cause it was rough. It was really rough again. But Randy was running that bigger boat. And he said, would you tell your brother that he doesn't have to hit all the big waves? I started laughing because I kind of knew what he was talking about. You know, growing up as a kid at Galveston area in Texas, you know, I did a little bit of surfing, and surfers look for the big sets. You'd sit out there on your board and you're looking, oh, that set's too small, that set's too... Well, what you learned was that all the waves aren't big, even on rough days. You have sets of medium size over here, and then sets of big ones over here, and then some rogue giants over here. And that's what John was talking about. You know, you in real rough water, you learn to run and to avoid as many of those big sets as you can avoid. But anyway, John evidently thought Randy hit a little too many of the big ones.
What did it take to win that tournament? You said recently it took over 100.
This was a 3-day tournament. Larry won it with 60 pounds, 10 ounces, 21 fish. So this year's tournament was won with 20 bass, because it's a 5-fish limit now, for 4 days, 20 bass for over 100 pounds. So
Bigger fish.
yeah, a lot bigger. Which seems to be what's happening across the country. Due to the Florida stockings and the F1 stockings, it seems like it's spread out in a lot of our lakes. Two things, or have more big fish, and secondly, the anglers are getting better at knowing how to catch them. Yep. And we're knowing also that they don't always live, the bigger ones don't live shallow very much, and except just particular bodies of water, yeah, they live shallow, like in Okeechobee stuff, but there's other, the man-made lakes, they don't live shallow very long. They're out there chasing shad in that deeper water. Well, that looks like it does it for 1980, September, October.